the newer version of resilience was about accepting not just the event, but how I felt about the event, which almost enabled me to bounce back stronger and better afterwards. Whereas I think if we don't allow that space for any challenge, it can actually have a longer tail of impact and effect, and it takes longer to bounce back. So resilience is this like dichotomy of still getting on the life and bouncing back, but without ignoring the thing and how it affects us as well.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. In order for us to create a better world, we have to be willing to let things die in our systems and structures. And death really is a requirement for our transformation. But death can bring up a lot, including fear. For example, when we humans stay stuck in the fear of the unknown, or resist the letting go of the old and outdated, or can't see outside of our individualism to see the benefits that will come through these changes for all. But what if the key to creating a better world was already here, living and breathing within us, rooted in the kindness and compassion, that beating heart that makes us human? But we, and by we, I am definitely looking at politicians, media, industry, and business leaders who are guiding us on this path, have been living a life through the lens of fear, individualism, and greed, instead of answering the call back to our connected, generous, and empathetic spirit that is just so human. About 1 in 4 people in the UK are living with a disability. Yet our systems, spaces, and media are just not inclusive of them, causing seismic harm globally. And to me, this highlights the urgency of the new world that we so desperately need. And my guest today doesn't just challenge the status quo, he reimagines and co-creates it. Martyn Sibley is simply incredible. He's on a mission to inspire, inform, and change the world around social issues. His work explores how designing with disabled people creates a far better world for us all. And he's been voted in the top 100 influential disabled people. And his work spans media through Purple Changemakers, marketing with his successful Purple Goat Inclusion Agency that he co-founded and is CEO of, and movements through Purple Collective, plus as the author of Everything is Possible. And this is a conversation of such hope, optimism, and joy, charting a path that, if we all took it, I know would truly change the world. Martyn, I'm so excited for our conversation. Welcome to Death on the Daily.
Thank you for having me. I'm equally excited.
Oh, I want to dive straight in because we've got so much to unpack. And let's start with you and your journey. And you write that your story is one of resilience, of hard work and positivity. So should we start there, just with anything that you wish to speak to when it comes to your journey, to how you've got here, the success you created, and the challenges that you faced along the way?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. So it's funny, like I always dive in my answers when we're at chats like this to my disability, because I think it's obviously a big part of my life experience. And so to give that bit of me, that part of my identity, I've got spinal muscular atrophy, which is it's under the umbrella of muscular dystrophy. So it's a neuromuscular condition. It's a very rare disease. It's genetic. So my mum and dad don't have the disability, but they both had the genes that meant that when I was then born, I have the disability. But beyond the sort of sciencey genetic stuff, it basically means that I'm physically I'm much weaker. So I've always needed a wheelchair to get around. I think I was diagnosed at 18 months old, and I had my first power electric wheelchair at the age of 3. So
Mm.
I'm now 41. So I've been driving around in a wheelchair quite a long, long time. And that's all of my waking hours. It's funny as well, like kids often go, so do you sleep in your chair? And I think adults probably wonder, sometimes some adults wonder those kind of questions, and we can get
Yeah.
into maybe that sort of perception of disability as we get into the chat. But yeah, so I get out my chair to sleep at night, but I'm in the chair all day. And I have like a live-in care assistant that helps me with those physical tasks that I can't do, such as helping me get dressed and having a bath and go to the toilet, that kind of stuff. So you can start to, from that place, imagine having to rely on someone for the most basic of needs and basic of tasks is not a typical life perception, to sort of understate it on some levels. But then also, like, getting around in a wheelchair is a very practical, like logistical thing around, is the world accessible for wheelchair users? So yeah, I think that that's sort of the framing around my personal growing up and having those needs and those requirements with my disability.
Mhm.
And I mean, to speak about it now, obviously there were times through life that, for example, having care assistants that weren't my mum and dad was a big step. And
Mm.
going abroad with a wheelchair is fraught with challenges. So there's, there are sort of moments in life that were more significant and more difficult.
Mhm.
But then at the same time, it's all I've ever known. And so because it's my daily life, it's my normal, it certainly never stopped me. And so that beyond my disability part of me, I went to mainstream school. I did economics at uni and a master's in marketing. I lived in London for about 5 years, having grown up in Cambridgeshire, and worked at a disability charity. And that really gave me the more kind of career slash purpose mission side of my work life. And so I've ended up being quite entrepreneurial, starting different businesses, different projects that are all about disability inclusion. And I love travel as well. I've been around lots of the world, and I've written a sort of memoir book on the trials and tribulations of traveling around. So yeah, there's a bit of a taste of my background there, I guess, for people.
Wow, Martin. Every time I hear you tell your story, I get so inspired. And I love as well, through the conversations that you inspire, you mentioned around children's curiosity and how much
Yeah,
is unsaid in our world. But for both of us, we work in the inclusion space, and obviously
yeah.
then that almost reinforces those biases and the fact that actually this unfortunately is a world that is not fit for purpose
Hmm.
when it comes to making sure that everyone, and specifically people with disabilities, are included in this world.
Yeah.
And I really want to acknowledge as well, because your journey is one of such resilience, and it's resilience where again it's pushing against boundaries that
Hmm.
shouldn't be there, but unfortunately we do live in this world. And I'm really curious to know, when it comes to you rooting into your resilience, what wisdom have you got to share with our listeners today from that perspective of how we navigate through life, how we face into really difficult challenges, and how we can, as you have, really root into what's most important to us, where we want to go in life, and just keep on pushing through to achieve that success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's obviously different layers and different contexts of resilience, and you and I know that everyone watching and listening, we've all got our own path. But I think a couple of thoughts that feel more universal, that connect all of us, is there was a time where resilience meant almost that kind of British stiff upper lip sentiment. So almost like, don't focus, like there's something happening, it's difficult, it doesn't feel comfortable, but it was almost like kind of ignore it, like kind of press on regardless. And I think there are times that did serve me and can serve others in the context of not letting a challenging situation just take over and everything else has to stop. Like obviously life goes on and there's other factors to still be, considered and dealt with. But I think what I hope got better at as I've got older is to be able to understand and feel that something is happening, it is real. My emotion and reaction to that is real and is valid. So not to dismiss any of that. But then there is still around resilience of still getting up each day, cracking on, making the best of the day in other ways, and also the agency to deal with whatever the given challenge may be. So that's quite theoretical and abstract, what I've just said.
Mhm.
But I mean, to give an example, I'm lucky in the sense that with my disability, I still health wise is generally good. Like I don't have pain. I'm up and about when I'm in my chair and ready for the day. Like I said earlier, I work, I've traveled, I'm married, all this kind of stuff. But I'm saying the risk, but the thing that I've always had to be careful of is the winter chest infections.
Mhm.
And so there's always been this fear of what if I was to get chest infection or pneumonia that can be quite dangerous, obviously, particularly because my cough's weaker and my respiratory system is a bit weaker. And last winter, the winter just gone, it was it was almost like the fears I'd always had all came true, where I had to go in an ambulance because of breathing related, like chest infection difficulties, and had to spend a couple of nights in hospital. Now, thankfully, it like being in the ambulance was like, well, I'm just in a vehicle, we're going somewhere, and being in the hospital, I was well looked after. The antibiotics kicked in, and luckily, unfortunately, the pneumonia was put at bay. And so, in the end, I came home recovered and on back to normal me. But I think it's a good illustration of like, I've always feared that happening. And suddenly those fears came true. And however much I would rather not be having that experience back in December, it was happening. I couldn't ignore it or pretend it. But and I've done a lot of work the last few years around sort of inner work, if you like. But I noticed that while it was scary, while it was uncomfortable, I definitely met it very differently to how I would have done 5, 10, 20 years ago. And so it doesn't take away how hard and difficult it was. But for me, the newer version of resilience was about accepting not just the event, but how I felt about the event, which almost enabled me to bounce back stronger and better afterwards. Whereas I think if we don't allow that space for any challenge, it can actually have a longer tail of impact and effect, and it takes longer to bounce back. So for resilience, it's this like dichotomy of still getting on with life and bouncing back, but without ignoring the thing and how it affects us as well.
I think that's so powerful. When you speak to resilience, that's speaking of that acceptance, and you mentioned earlier as well around all of the emotions that can come up, and being like, it's okay to feel emotions, it's okay to feel fear, it's okay to be very, I suppose, very present with what's happening right now. Because to your point, actually, I think there's that misconception where people see, I'm not even going to call it resilience, I'm going to call it strength, as that we punch down, we push down on anything that feels difficult, and we avoid it and numb out and somehow sort of march our way through it. But actually, it's not. For me, resilience is a really interesting one, to your point, because to be resilient, you have to be acknowledging and accepting of, yes, this is my situation. this is where I'm at. This is everything that's happening. That's everything that I've learned through sort of going actually into the space of losing our daughter and really sitting with my grief. Again, the only way out, I believe, is through. And to your point, in doing that, we really understand actually where's that well of strength that we never even knew that we had. To your point, actually, where you mentioned that 5 to 10 years ago, you wouldn't have navigated it in exactly the same way. I feel exactly the same way. I think if I'd have navigated anything in my 20s and without the presence that I've been able to find in the difficult, again, I probably would have been watching Netflix and doing everything to avoid it. And to your point, then creating a much longer tail, because at some point it's going to erupt.
Yeah, we only can deal with things where we are at, and I'm just really looking now and thinking, there are people that, as sort of children and people in their 20s, do have traumatic events, and so I want them to still know that they'll meet it where they are, and there's no wrong or right way either. And I know you and I both know that, but I think it's good to speak that. But yeah, at the same time, it happened to me at a late, in sort of my 40s, and so I definitely had the benefit of having done other kind of inner work in more recent years. And I think my granddad always used to say, we're always given what we can cope with, and it might sometimes feel a bit on the edge of too much, and maybe sometimes like it is too much, but ultimately, like whatever life brings to us, we'll always find the way through. But I think that what we've spoken about, resilience and acceptance, it just can make those challenging paths a little easier, but they are still difficult in their own nature, of course.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Martyn. And what I'm really connecting into as well is the power, because if I take myself back into even younger, into my teens, into my 20s, probably the period where I was numbing the most, if I think what was missing there as well, it was really that mentorship. So having people around me who were willing to speak to their experiences. And as you were sharing that, I think exactly to that point, I do believe that, if we'd have faced, or if I'd have faced what, for example, losing my daughter in my 20s, exactly that, I would have faced into it in some way, and that would have been exactly right based upon where I was. And who knows, again, post-traumatic growth is a real thing. So that equally might have awakened me in the same way that it did now. But equally, as I'm connecting in, I'm thinking about even connecting into the wisdom of our elders and the stuff that when we used to live in communities and everything we've disconnected from in this world, that is ultimately taking us away from our wholeness as humans. I also think there's something really powerful if I could speak to my younger self, or me being able to speak to people who are younger than me, to be able to just share in my experience and say, hey, this is how I've journeyed through something that is really challenging and devastating. And this is how I tapped into that resilience. This is what it means to me, to inspire others to perhaps take a look at themselves and their well of resource within them, perhaps even before something happens, to understand actually that we are resourced. We do have that within us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I was just sort of wondering when you spoke there that, like, with the disability inclusion work I do, and it's always I'm not saying a contradiction, but it's like that there are a lot of people in the world that have some kind of disability. I think it's around 1 in 4. Yeah, it depends on different like societies, governments, research, statistics, but give or take about 1 in 4 people have a disability, which is a lot more than I think general public would guess if they were asked that question, because it does feel a very marginal, peripheral conversation. I think it's partly because someone like myself in a wheelchair is different from someone who is blind or has visually impaired, etc. So I think there's something in that the sub-communities makes it feel like it's a lesser of the population. But the contradiction, or the balance I try to strike, I suppose, is that if I only talk about disability, it creates a silo. It creates like a them and us, which is the antithesis of inclusion. But then when you talk about the universality of inclusion, there are definitive points for disability that are different from race or gender or sexuality in that broader sort of diversity, equity, inclusion world. But so I just wanted to kind of frame a little bit of that generally. But to the point you just made about being able to pass on to, say, the next generation, that's been extremely powerful, both for me with older disabled people showing what's possible when
Wow.
I was like, I'm in a chair and films and media and culture says that I'm the recipient of charity and
Mm.
I won't have a lot of chance of getting a job, whatever those sort of hidden
Yeah.
messages are.
Yeah.
And so to draw that out of disability into the more universality of the human experience, really, it's exactly what you just said. It's that all the role models that help us, and then us passing that on to the next generation for them to find their path, but to have that wisdom. And I think whatever topic you take, that's got to be one of the most important things in how we navigate this weird and wonderful world at the moment.
Oof. Oh, Martyn, I am feeling that. I think what I had in my mind going through was a beautiful visual, because that is our ripple effect, and it's where there is no, we can't quantify how wide that ripple effect is, because to your point, someone could set off a ripple that would then go down generations of
Yeah.
that mentorship. And I feel like that's a real reconnection. I feel like we're coming into this. What do we need to burn down in the world? What needs to die in the world to create a new world where we can all thrive? Because actually there is such power in us as individuals, in our stories, in that which we can share to support others as we navigate, as you say, this world that just, there's, I mean, I feel like it just needs it needs a big overhaul. There needs to be a full rewrite in lots of ways. But I think that it's such a beautiful space that we could almost start this conversation in, which I hope that for anyone listening as well will give that hope and that agency that we all have, because I also really acknowledge the fact that right now we can feel really helpless, and it feels like everything's just happening, and we're seeing all of these atrocities happening in the world. So, shall we dive into the very big question on, if we are to revision a world, and I know that you write so powerfully, Martyn, as well, about the fact that actually your work to create a world that is inclusive for people who have disabilities is actually creating a world that is better for everyone.
Yeah.
So I'd love to start there.
And I think that's been quite a eureka moment for me the last year or two, actually. There was this whole almost couple of decades nearly of working where it was like, so there's something called the social model of disability, and it really helped me feel liberated myself and also creates a template for disabled people to see the world more empowered. And the social models basically, like, I have spinal muscular atrophy, that's my disability, but I'm actually disabled by the barriers of society. And to break that down, there's environmental barriers. So if there's steps, I'm disabled. If there's a ramp, I'm not disabled. If attitudes make presumptions of me, I'm disabled. But if attitudes are open to meeting me as I am, I'm not disabled. And then procedurally, and I appreciate it's like a academic framework which can have that feel to it, but procedure would be like a job interview. If you go for a job interview and the way that they're assessing has a barrier that stops you from showing your true potential for that job, then you're disabled. Let alone if you can't get to the job interview because there's steps, like that kind of flips back to environment. So it made me finally feel like I'm not the problem for having SMA, but the world, and let me put it in this way, the world is the problem, inverted commas, by having these barriers. Now, So all that first part of my career was very much with this model. The challenge you've got is that everyone from the community loved it, agreed with it, and all that. But I wasn't necessarily speaking to business leaders or government leaders about it. And if I was, or and many like me were, there was a bit of a pointy finger, like you're the problem, and that didn't feel like a good bridging narrative. And the last
Interesting.
couple of years, I found a book called Citizens by John Alexander. And really, it's wrestling with the topic of democracy. And ultimately, charities or businesses or governments all thrive more when they co create and include the citizens or the stakeholder, the customers in the creation part, not we've created it and we're now telling you to come and consume it. And so there's so much. I hope I'm not losing people with a lot of different concepts, but the shift is the social model still matters as a disabled person, but the language when you talk to the gatekeepers needs to be more like conciliatory, and if we all do this together,
Yeah.
it doesn't just help me as a disabled person or us as disabled people, it helps everyone. And that's been a really big deal the last couple of years for me.
Wow, I love that. And the social model, just that really, really hit hard in my heart, because I think that is such a crucial foundation that we all should understand. But to your point, obviously, there's a sensitive way to step into those conversations. I love when you mention co-creation. Co-creation is one of my favorite words at the moment, because
Yeah,
it's true. To create a new world, I think exactly as you shared, it's not going to be done through pointing fingers at people. It's through, let's have a conversation and see how we can co-create a world in which we can all thrive. That was the energy that I could really feel
yeah.
emanating through.
And it's more universal, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that the sort of disability cultural language around social model is bad, because it back in the 70s and 80s, where there was no legislation, there were no rights for disabled people.
Wow.
It was the social model and the language of the social model that led to the activists winning those rights. So it's like
Wow.
standing on the shoulders of giants. It was all really important. And now we are more empowered. And like I told you, Monday, I was at a roundtable for government around small medium enterprises. It wasn't just here's a roundtable about disability. I was there as a disabled leader amongst other non-disabled, again with all the labels, but like other people that had nothing to do with disability, and that felt like inclusion. So I think that inclusion is the language that unifies everyone, and co-creation is another more universal phrase that everyone can understand and get behind. So I feel like there's a needing to rewrite or have new language for this kind of new chapter, if you like, of disability inclusion.
Oh, I love that. The new language to come through, because that's really, that then embodies that spirit to take
Yeah.
forwards. Oh, I love that. And if we're taking forwards this co-creational energy and this new way, as you shared, it's standing on the shoulders of giants, and actually the fact that there are people who have come before, and there's all of these brilliant frameworks and models that is really giving the foundations from where we are. Because one thing, and this is where through Death on the Daily, we speak to all of the ways that death shows up for us in life. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the fact that actually transformation requires death. For example, there's a reason in the tarot cards, there's the death card that everybody go, oh my goodness, the death cards come up. But actually the death card signifies there's stuff that needs to die now in order for us to step into whatever it is that's new. From this place of co-creation, what do you think I suppose, again, this is a very big question given the size of the issue in our systems.
Hit me.
I'm going to hit you with a big question. We'll see where we flow from here. What needs to die and be composted in our systems in order for those new seeds, those co-creational seeds to sprout? And I suppose, how can we navigate that, as you share, with what I can feel is a real compassionate spirit that is in itself an embodiment of inclusive, of we bring you all in rather than pushing anyone out? So, I mean, that's a really big question. I don't know how much we can take to solve that.
One word comes to mind, and that's fear.
Fear.
And I feel like, you and I have spoke a bit lately, and I've had a couple of years where I've been more reading and consuming content that's, I guess, more of a spiritual nature, and that's been like a personal endeavor that I've found really empowering and positive. And I'm also mindful of not having like certain esoteric ideas making the conversation harder to grasp from a social, political kind of like day-to-day problems. And you and I know they are one and the same, but I'm just mindful of not going off on a wild, just a random spiritual tangent.
Go wherever you wish to. This is, if you want to go there, this is the space to go there. But you go wherever you want to go.
But I think fear is like, it's the fear that is holding everyone back. And that's when you read a lot in more spiritual texts about oneness. As humans, we are all interconnected. And again, you can get into the physics of why that's true, and you can get into the, as I say, other esoteric spiritual texts. But whether you're pure like physics, metaphysics, and pure other areas, it does come back to the same conclusion that we're all part of a larger organism. And I think that, so why are we not more included and like co-creating things together? It's because of fear. And so like way back, that fear kept us all alive and enabled us to evolve to where we are now. But that is what needs to die to enable a more evolved and like positive experience for everyone. And again, I was very mindful of like it just sounding overly abstract, but I really believe and see how that looks in reality. That if people are not going, oh, cost of living, what if I don't have a job next year, or what if I can't pay for food in the next month? They understandably, like full of compassion on this, would feel and act very differently to the othering that we're bombarded by in the media. But if the media would be less divisive and we were all reminded of what we have in common as much as what our differences are, then we would all act, I think, more kindly and more generously to each other in a real, practical, pragmatic way, not just a like, these are lovely lyrics to a lovely song kind of way.
Oh, Martyn, I'm really connecting into that as well. And I know that you are really big as well on our, as well, obviously the spiritual development, but also I think when you bring it into any types of personal development, like leadership development, etc., what do we work on? We work on those fears. What are those fears holding us back? And I think that it's really powerful because, as you shared that, and you mentioned around the media, the whole media narrative is built on fear, on exactly to your words, that othering.
Yeah.
And what does that do? It keeps us rooted in our, again, it just makes us rooted into that individualism that is never served us and is not serving us. Like I love that wholeness, that oneness that you evoked through everything that you shared, because actually it is that. It's when you think humanity is singular, but it's plural at the same time. It's not humanities.
Yeah.
It's one thing. It's just humanity.
Well, another fear is that if I accept, or we accept, this oneness, then what happens to me as an individual? But that's just a fear, because it's still, we still have our individual identity. It doesn't take away that we can wake up and choose to do what we want to do with our life, but it also acknowledges that more collective nature. And there's just so much heaviness in history around political ideologies that went wrong and general societal ideologies that went wrong. And I think in the end, it's about, because even the word spiritual, it has connotations and can be emotionally loaded. It's basically the human experience, right? And how we all live individually and together in a way that's good for everyone. And if we could root it in that, I think that's it. So what needs to die? It's that fear and it's that othering, and that realizing that on the other side, like we said earlier, when you go through the fear, something better is often on the other side of it.
Oh, wow. Going through that fear, that importance for us to face into our fears. And because I loved as well when you shared around creating a world and what's coming through. For me, in my connections to that vision, you used the word kindness earlier.
Yeah.
And I really feel that so much of this, again, is rooted, that ripple effect and that transformation can be rooted from that place of kindness. If we all just showed up and we were just kind,
Yeah.
imagine that
It
is
can be that simple. It really can be that simple. Yeah.
exactly that. So how do we, and again, I know this is a big question, but what is that potential path? And I appreciate that it might be one person at a time. And there are big organizations like the media that do need a real flip in how they operate. Same with social media and the algorithms that, again, are built on fear, are built on people piling in and bullying and horrible energy. How do we inspire and take action towards that flip from, so if anyone's listening and going, yeah, I'm with you on this mission, what are actions that we can take to help us to be able to create, whether it's internally or more externally as well, our ripple effect? And I believe the work actually does start with us, doesn't it? But to create that fear into pushing through and that kindness on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my overarching thought was the same, that media or government or business or the people on social media, all of those institutions, if you like, are people. So basically it is back to people. But I think there's a more specific, tangible thought I had to when you asked the question. So I'm involved in a project called Drop Dead Generous, and it's spawned out of a lot of this broader philosophy or thinking. So a guy, the TED Talks?
Yes.
So the guy, Chris Anderson, who's run TED for 20 odd years, he wrote a book called Infectious Generosity. And it partly talks about how we're biologically, made, if you like, to be generous. Like it's part of our innate nature. It's not almost like it has to be learned. Like it's built in from a survival perspective. Because again, if you go back in the past, we got on actually better when we worked together, right? So there is this kindness, generosity built into us. Then we've got this thing called the internet, which at the minute, unfortunately, seems to spread messages that are not maybe what we would prefer, shall we say. But it's a message can go round the world in a second and reach millions, if not billions of people. So his book is about how to create more generosity and how to tell those stories. And so Drop Dead Generous is giving away 1,000 grants of $500 each. And every recipient of the grant would be buying something with the money to give to someone or some people as a generous act.
Wow.
But it has to have a bit of like a hook and a story so that it can also spread online. So I'm not making out this is the one and only answer, but it's things like this that is catalyzing people to be kind and generous, where a philanthropist has provided the funding as well. So people can't go, I've not got the money to do that. The money's there. It's just that's the catalyst. And then almost trying to take over the internet to be more positive.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I feel like it's like how can we do like a kindness flash mob of the
Yeah,
internet?
I mean, it's kind of those sentiments, right? And every grant is different. And then I'm with my wife, Kasha, we're on this kind of 6 month experiment as we're cats, meaning catalysts. And so we get 3 golden tickets a month to give to people in our network. And we do a meetup once per month. So, like, look, 2 weeks ago, we set up a street party on our street and we met people we'd never met, but there were people who lived on the street for 40 years. They'd not ever spoke to each other.
Wow, that says a lot about where our society's got to, doesn't it?
It does say a
It'd
lot.
definitely be the same on our
Yeah.
street, for sure.
But so for all of our, and you and I could chat all year long about like philosophy and that and the
Yeah.
big the theories, if you like. But like that was practical, tangible, get your people in the street together, bring some food, get to know people, get off phones, get off. And ironically, the internet is important to spread the good messages, but there's a dichotomy of also get off the internet and just go into nature and connect with yourself and connect with other people. So I feel like these are some of, in my opinion, the answers to some of these big problems that we all see and we all feel every day, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think what's really powerful there, because obviously I know in a lot of your work you are sitting around tables with government, with
Yeah.
charities, with massive organizations, but to your point, actually just how we show up in our communities, on our streets is
Yeah.
just as important. And I think that that's a really powerful message for anyone who is tuning in, because I know, and I have moments where I feel in this world very hopeless and helpless, but I always remind myself and reroute back into, no, it's how I show up in the shops, how I just help someone who I see on the street who maybe has dropped something, or like it's the little things that count. And as well, for me in my grief journey, I can vividly remember people who've done the most tiny little things that we would think that's insignificant, but there are some people who've done really small moments of human connection that I will probably remember for the rest of my life because it means that much. And then if you just happen to chance upon someone where your kindness actually helps to just break a little bit of maybe a hard shell because they've had a really difficult life, because they've been traumatized, because they've pushed stuff down, because they've never had anyone who's taken a second to truly listen to them and how they're feeling, I believe again that can really change the course of our human history just through us showing up in that kindness and compassion.
I totally agree. And there's something there as well about like, I do a lot around representation within that disability representation narrative, but actually it's about showing up whoever we are and telling our story, our empowered story. And so when I was just thinking about the importance of being with people in person, in that government room at that round table, I said the narrative around this welfare bill, it's such a sad state of affairs that we've diluted disability into this really one-dimensional, disempowering narrative. And I'm like saying this across the table to this very, very senior government minister, but it wasn't out of like pointy finger, I'm annoyed at you as an individual. It was like, I believe and I see and I observe that. But in being able to be in the room and to represent disability, I know that the minister received that positively because he saw my humanity. It wasn't like just abstract, angry citizens. I said it very fairly and roundedly, but to have that opportunity to be at that round table and say that, I know that he also appreciated that feedback, and who knows where that leads to. So again, there's a lot around storytelling, representation, and getting to know the human. And I also mean that ministers and business leaders are humans. Like, they have their own fears, their own families, their own humanity. And I think we sometimes dilute them into like non-human beings. And I think that's the empathy piece we have to work on as well.
Oh, that's so, so powerful. And I think as well as I connected into what you were saying, I connected into your heart, because equally, if you'd have said, you know what, I was furious in that
Yeah,
comment,
yeah.
justified to
Every
do
right
so,
to be. Yeah,
given
yeah.
what the government
Yeah.
is currently doing and planning on doing. And
Mm.
what I can feel is with you, with that presence, and you mentioned earlier as well around that being really present with everything that's coming up. For me as well, the power of that is that can help us to plot that more compassionate path, which oftentimes it's not just compassion for the other person, it's more compassionate for ourselves. Because actually, if that helps to get to that resolution, because it's not pushing against a closed door of fears, it's actually saying, hey, how can we just open up that door just a little bit and have such a really meaningful conversation where the other person, you're going to listen now, is what I heard that you just evoked in that. They were truly, truly there and listening to you. I think that is so powerful in our world. It's definitely what we need. And I'm fortunate, because equally, I do think people are justified to be absolutely furious.
Yeah, as you say, there's so much going on. It doesn't excuse certain decisions, even if we know they're individuals and they're human, like, they are making certain decisions that are unjustifiable. So it's, yeah, it's like there's a nuance, isn't there, within this?
Yeah, there is. There is. What I really connected there is that nuance, because for me, I think it's not excusing anything,
No,
but actually that we can move with that empathy and compassion.
it's speaking truth, actually, but
Yes.
respectfully. I think that's almost the thing there, isn't it? It's
Oof.
like, you don't hold back and like, oh, you've done this shit thing and I understand you're a human. You're like pointing out the shit thing,
Yeah.
but from a place of humanity, of like, how do we co-create a better way?
Oh, I love that. I love that, because in that there's no dimming of lights, no not speaking your truth.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Well, Martyn, I'm conscious we've got about 3 minutes left. As always with you, I literally could talk to you for the length of probably an audiobooks version of this podcast. We have our chats where we definitely, when I connect into your visionary spirit and all of that, I come out and I'm like,
Mm.
right,
And
what do
thank you so much for
do
your
I go?
support with that. It's so
Oh,
appreciated.
oh, it expands me greatly. But before we come to a close on this episode of the podcast, I have a feeling at some point there's definitely going to be a part two, because I feel like there's so much more that we need to unpack in this space. Before we close out, I've got one question, just to see if you could write a note to yourself, and this is past version of yourself, perhaps from childhood, when you're in your teens, or any point in life from where you're sitting right now. What words would you share with that version of yourself?
Yeah, interestingly, I often, for whatever reason, think of 15-year-old Martyn. And I was like, I had to have a really big back operation. I was out of school for a term. So like, there was quite specific stuff going on, and just puberty and just like, and I can remember then thinking like, would I ever find love and a partner that would accept me with a disability, and the challenges, shall we say, that brings. Would I be able to work? There was like really lofty questions of like, will I be able to do the things that I, as Martyn, wanted to do? Would my disability stop or prevent or hinder? And a bit like we said about going through the fear, I've almost found that having this life with the disability I've got, and it took a lot of work, but once I accepted it rather than resented it, it's arguably been one of the main things that provided so many beautiful life experiences. So I've, like, as I said, I've traveled, I've started and run different businesses. I met the Prime Minister last year, like all these things, they were very much because of my career in disability inclusion that enabled those, certainly work wise and travel wise, was around almost because of the disability, if that makes sense. So there was something I would want to relay that to my younger self, that it's what you feel is your weakness is often your biggest gift, would be more of a universal way of phrasing it.
What you feel is your weakness is often your biggest gift. As
Yeah.
you were sharing that perspective of 15-year-old you, I was connecting in as well. So to your beautiful wife, your dog, and all of those aspects of your life. Yeah, everything, the businesses that you've created, everything. Absolutely incredible. Well, with that spirit in mind, I feel, as always with you, when I close out any of our conversation, I feel so inspired in the forwards path. Just for the last minute, just would love for you to share, where can anyone who's tuning in today, where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there's 3 core areas of my work at the moment, which, as we said, the chats we've had have really helped frame it. So Purple Changemakers is essentially my personal writings and videos, and when I speak at conferences and stuff. So my website is martynsibley.com, and on socials like LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok, all that good stuff. So that's kind of my news and updates and thinkings and that sort of stuff. Purple Goat, and we didn't sort of get into some of the nuts and bolts of the projects I do, but Purple Goat is a marketing agency working with global brands to include disabled consumers. So there's some awesome stuff if people want to check out purplegoatagency.com. And then the Purple Collective is a sort of startup newer project I'm working on, and it's looking at empowering change makers and convening stakeholders, like we said, for that co-creation side of things, particularly when brands or government don't have or want to spend budget. So the collective is a not-for-profit, so we're fundraising to like run the infrastructure and then able to run those programs. And I think that in the next 5 years has got a lot of potential, and that's purplecollectiveglobal.com.
I will put all of the links in the show notes, and a lot of my marketing friends do tune into this podcast. So I'd say if you are in agency or brand world, definitely check out Purple Goat Agency, and more generally, just keep an eye on everything that Martyn is building, because again, to our conversation, we all should want to be a part of this. It's so important for the better world for all of us. So my gratitude to you, Martyn, for joining me today. It's just been an absolute wall-to-wall joy. I can't stop smiling.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me on.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside. And we'll never make it, and we'll never break it.